So, anyone else planning on seeing this?
Yeah, I'll make it no secret. The main reason I'm doing this particular review right now is because I want to capitalize on what's more than likely going to be one of the biggest films of the year. Though at the same time, it's hard not to make comparisons between these two movie franchises about a bunch of established superheroes coming together to take down significant threats before ending on a climax with a massive cosmic adversary.
My only hope now is that there isn't any sudden drop in quality in any future Marvel crossovers.
But yeah, Deluxe 3, the last in the original All-Stars trilogy, and the last Precure movie to be directed by Takashi Otsuka. Now, Otsuka would stick around at Toei to direct a certain other Precure series, and for whatever reason would try to remake the climax to this movie, as well as possibly several other scenes in that particular series.
But that's a subject for another day. For now, let's close the book on the original, multi-part superhero crossover trilogy with Precure All-Stars Deluxe 3, Mirai ni Todoke, Sekai o Tsunagu Nishiro no Hana. Okay, one advantage the Avenger movies have over this: shorter titles.
Our film opens with the sweet teen checking out a big fancy shopping mall. Enjoy while you can, girls. The world economy is not going to be able to support these places by the end of the decade. In the middle of it, they stumble upon a fashion show hosted by some familiar looking faces. This, for whatever reason, gives Hami the bright idea to jump down to the stage while giving, 1, 2, 3 people serious concussions.
You know, when I reviewed Deluxe 2, I kind of criticized how they kind of missed the mark with the Heartcatch team's characterization. So I'm just glad they got Hami and her ADHD down pat here. Good job there, guys.
Speaking of Heartcatch, it's time for the requisite meme between the two most recent teams at the time.
Oh, come on, Hibiki. You were just a few inches away from a perfect spear. You really gotta put your back into it.
But yeah, because of Hami's usual insufferable antics. The other Precure teams take notice of Hibiki and Kanade, and why is Daisuke just letting his lip hang out like that?
Dude. Hello. Hey.
Then again, maybe he just foresaw what was coming. My worst nightmares come true. So yeah, someone was messing with the multiverse and the many different fairy worlds were merging with the human world.
Uh-oh, rather than the Infinity Gauntlet, this is starting to turn into DC versus Marvel, and I think we're entering into the Amalgamverse. Quick, somebody find Howard and make sure he doesn't merge with Lobo! Yes, that actually happened.
Also, ignoring the absence of Majorland, this movie came out early into Sweet Precure's run. I love how they cheaped out on the designs for the background fairies, especially the Heartcatch ones, by simply palette swapping them. Still, that lack of creativity was nothing compared to these things.
We've got our MacGuffins for the movie!
No, apparently these particular miracle lights, I don't know how you tell them apart, were related to the movie's eponymous Nishiro no Hana, or Prism Flower. And as if on cue, the villains of this film arrive. This time around, they were made up of all of the Precure's previous non-crossover movie villains, including Toy Majin and Baron Salamander, which if you saw my reviews for those movies, you know that both of these guys are still alive and reformed. Hell, this dude, Mushiban, he also had somewhat of a change of heart at the end of his movie, so why are they all doing here? Well, the answers to all of that is actually rather simple. These guys weren't the genuine oracles, but rather the living embodiments of their discarded malice. And they weren't the only ones, as the being who actually created them was a massive amalgamation of the malice and dark energy from all of the seasonal final bosses the Precure had defeated up until then. Oh, and apparently he also created both Fusion and Bottom. Funny, I recall Bottom saying that he was a being from 1,000 years in the past.
So, does Black Hole have some time-traveling abilities, or is this just a really sloppy retcon? You know what, it's okay. Bomb sucked as a villain anyway, so this does give him a little bit more purpose, and does tie together all the movies nicely.
The Precure all transform, and after going over stuff I just explained, we actually learn what the Prism Flower is.
Yeah, remember how ill-defined the Rainbow Jewel was in the last movie?
How it was supposedly the source of all hope in the world, and yet even after it was seemingly destroyed, everyone remained exactly the same. I think even the writers realized how much they botched up that plot device, and decided to put some actual thought into the Prism Flower. It essentially acted as the main conduit between the human world and the May fairy worlds.
Which actually kind of fits in nicely with the larger Precure lore.
After all, traveling between the worlds has always seemed ridiculously easy across all of the seasons, so it makes sense that there would be something that streamlines the whole process. They don't go a lot into detail about it, like its origins and such, but again, it makes more sense than something that suddenly becomes the power source of all of the Precure teams. Before they're able to launch any sort of counterattack, the villains actually do the smart thing and split up the Precure team, sending them into separate pocket dimensions. Granted, they don't take it a step further by taking them out individually and instead just break them up into 3 groups. However, said groupings actually kind of work to the villain's advantage. One group was made up entirely of lead Precure, another was made up of mostly second-in-commands, and the third was made up of mostly 6 Rangers with a few outliers. A Vanguard can't function properly without any followers, followers can't correlate without leaders, and while the 6 Ranger group was technically the most stable of the 3 groups, their specialized skill sets ultimately made them less than suited for the challenges placed in front of them. More on that in a bit, but yeah, impressive forward thinking by the villains.
Not usually a term I associate with Precure villains.
Anyway, on top of that, the villains create battlefields that combine the ones from their respective movies, as well as summoning hordes of monsters of the week. Oh boy, the Tyson villains wish they could make these make callbacks. Meanwhile, on the outside, Shadow, an LGBT villain from Yes Precure 5, was looking for the Prism Flower. The fairies tried to stop, she by stealing her mirrors.
I'd just like to remind everyone out there that this franchise is targeted at little girls. So, yeah, you can't blame them for teaching them stranger danger. No, don't show him again!
Well, whatever. Just like Uraganos from Deluxe 2, Shadow is anticlimactically defeated when the fairies use their stupid gimmick lights.
Isn't it great how just to push these glorified flashlights, these movies turn one strengthening villains into Nekozawa from Oran High.
Don't let a simple flashlight get the best of you! Work up your nerve!
Back with the Precure, each group is faced with different challenges to overcome, on top of the aforementioned mixing and matching of their respective teams. The leader group had to find an exit in a desert labyrinth, the lieutenants had to fight on an unstable water battlefield, and the 6 Ranger group had to play some Mario Party. Yeah, remember this from the Fresh Precure movie? Well, while that whole sequence was cut short, most likely because Toymajin got impatient with how long the damn transformation sequences in that movie were taking, the 6 Ranger team had to play every single game they came across to get to the goal. Eventually, they did find their groove, and after a quick and funny little montage, they neared the goal. At the same time, the other groups were also starting to gel and finding ways to defeat their enemies. The Lieutenant group managed to goad the Freezing Brothers into freezing the watery battlefield.
Get lost.
And the leaders used mostly brute force.
Hey, what do you expect when all but one of them are so hot-headed that they wouldn't feel out of place in Team Daigren? And even Tsubomi has her moments.
I kid, of course, as I do like that in spite of having not worked together for extended periods, these patched together groups were able to find some bit of cohesion and work off of that. It matches up with a franchise-wide theme that I keep bringing up in Precure, the fact that their greatest strength will always be their kindness and their ability to recognize when someone is struggling. In this case, Kanade and Hibiki, who were still very much rookies of this little gathering and concerned about the other. However, with the backing of some good senior members, they managed to push forward.
There's a reason Versus is never included in the titles of any of these big crossover events.
Each group managed to escape their respective pocket dimensions, starting with the 6 Ranger group, who actually used some rather clever tactics to stun Toimaji and Salamander.
そこ一回休みよ。
This game is such BS! With all of the groups reunited, they proceed to take down the villains in a sequence that I really have no words other than it's just amazing. Each team takes down their respective movie villains, with the exception of the Freezing Brothers, who are taken out by the Sweet Team, since, you know, they didn't have a movie yet, and they needed someone to job out to them. Yeah, it's a little weird that the Rookie Team managed to take down the guys who gave the OG pair trouble, but I'll let it pass, at least it's not as bad as being taken out by flashlights. So they take down all the villains, and yet I can't help but feel like we're forgetting something.
Well, we're boned.
Oh yeah, they still have to deal with the Thanos of this movie.
Though, rather than Thanos, this guy kind of reminds me of someone else I know, though I can't quite put my finger on it.
Say. Did you get our friend invite?
Yeah, accepted and everything.
Great! Really gonna need a good Lancer for this next event.
Oh yeah, I've got a double-grailed Malter and everything, so I think she'll fit in perfectly into your crit-based team.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I have unusual friends. Wait, what was he carrying?
So, unsurprisingly, an Eldritch Abomination created from 6 final bosses not only wipes the floor with them, he nukes the floor with them! The Precure managed to survive the blast, but at the cost of their transformation trinkets. And as it just so happens, that blast also managed to expose the location of the Prism Flower.
Prism Flower, if being an Apple user has taught me anything, it's that you should never rely on clouds for security.
Sure enough, Black Hole generates some really creepy looking black hands with the intent of destroying it. Powerless, it seemed like all the Precure could do was sit back and watch as their last salvation was being extinguished. They did, however, have one last option: take the last bit of energy from the flower for themselves in order to transform one more time. In exchange though... Ew, the painful sting of irony. However, if their time away from their respective teams had taught them anything, it's that regardless of where they were, they would always remain connected. Be it literal worlds apart, the time they spent together will never disappear, and as long as they have a tomorrow, they can keep moving forward. With their hearts resolved, the Precure did what they needed to do and called out to the Prism Flower to give them strength. However, by the time they did, Black Hole had already shattered it. Luckily though, the movie still hasn't quite met its Miracle Light shilling quota, so Hummy breaks the fourth wall again to ask the audience to wave around the lights to give the Precure power. Because, yeah, it's not as though we couldn't have just gone straight to the Prism Flower giving the Precure the ability to transform, thereby maintaining smooth plot progression. No, we have to go through this again. For that matter, how did the entire world know they had to wave around the lights? Whatever, the final fight is awesome, so let's just pretend like that never happened, and just say they got their powers from Lord Genome or something. Speaking of which...
You know, in the past I've had Sorial Days and Outside accompany the scene, but I think for a final boss fight like this, it deserves the theme to my all-time favorite video game ever.
Thus, our film ends with the day one, but at the cost of all parties involved being forced to say goodbye to close friends. Yeah, this is truly the end of the Precure. I mean, it's not as though they still had like an entire season worth of episodes, or several other series in the planning stages. No, this is really the end. Of course it's not. I mean, it's still an effective scene, like with Feed the Kitty, where even though we knew what was coming, the emotions of the characters helped sell it. But yeah, within a surprisingly short amount of time, a new Prism Flower reached maturity, and the fairies reunited with their human friends, bringing the original deluxe trilogy to a close.
This movie is fantastic. What else do you want me to say?
Well, okay, if I have to put my critiquing hat on for a minute, I will say it does suffer from a similar issue the Avengers movies do, in that you do at least need some exposure to the previous entries in the franchise in order to truly appreciate this one, especially with the massive amount of callbacks they made throughout it. I'd probably recommend at least watching Deluxe 1 and an entire season of A series preceding Sweet along with its accompanying movies before picking this one up. Also, while the fight scene animation was fantastic, some of the civilian scenes, especially in the beginning, you can tell they cut corners, as I already pointed out with Daisuke's frozen face, as well as several other side characters. And of course, I will never like the Miracle Lights. While their presence was nowhere near as intrusive as in the last movie, they still tend to break the flow of any scene they're in, and of course, it just feels cheap to kill off a movie villain with them, plus the guy's own mirrors. Seriously, looking at Xiao's TV Tropes entry is actually kinda depressing. Still, those are minor gripes in the long run, as pretty much everything else was great. About 3/4 of this movie is just an elongated, epic battle, starting with a boss rush, before reaching one of the grandize of all final bosses. Though, while that's great and everything, to me the most interesting aspect of this film was seeing the mixed and matched groups work together. Up until this point, outside of the intro scenes, the Precure have interacted almost exclusively with their respective teams, so this scenario led to some interesting new dynamics that really shook things up for the better. Yes, of course, there was trepidation at first, but if anything else, the Precure will always be made up of some of the most amiable heroines, so of course it didn't take long before they found some common ground, and were able to work together, and even pull off a few good comedy skits. Yeah, if there wasn't any action going on, this film had some of the better comedy in the franchise, especially with the Six Ranger group. As a result, there was always something going on, and it never really felt too drawn out or forced. Again, outside of the lights, they really need to restrict those things to just once per movie. It's only 70 minutes long, but damn if this movie makes it feel even shorter than that.
Next time, we'll cover the final chapters of the Kira Kira Precure manga adaptation before we close the book on the Sweet Precure reviews. I'm kind of wishy-washy when it comes to my review schedule, but until then though, farewell for now my friends, and I better go protect the last of the Infinity Stones.